of ordnance, things that we haven't seen in the past, very accurate weapons, very lethal. The Moab is a daisy cutter on steroids, and Iraq is not prepared for what's going to be thrown at them.
Bob Bevilacqua live with us in Washington. Bob, thanks very much. So over the first 24 hours, as I was mentioning, a move from the south toward the north, a relentless bombing campaign to start it out with literally thousands of targets that have already been identified. Then a move from the north to the south and eventually surrounding the city of Baghdad. And then we find out whether the elite Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard will in fact fight. That's what remains unknown as Fox reports tonight. There will be continuing coverage, of course, and the O'Reilly Factor is coming up next on Fox News Channel. But first, we have this. The deadline is now. 48 hours ago, President George W. Bush gave Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein an ultimatum: leave Iraq with your sons or face military conflict. Now at 8 p.m. in Washington, 4 a.m. in Baghdad, time has expired. Saddam Hussein says the administration has made his final mistake. War is imminent. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the coalition of the willing plan to disarm Iraq and cause regime change in its capital. It is a conflict set to begin at the time of the coalition's choosing, a moment believed to be hours or days from now. We've reached this point after a series of events since a ceasefire in the Persian Gulf War of 1991. In order that the bombing end and that Allied forces stop their move to Baghdad, the Iraqi leader signed an agreement that he would destroy all weapons of mass destruction and never again invade neighboring countries or kill his own people. It is the conclusion of the American administration that the Iraqi regime did not and has not disarmed. Saddam Hussein is deemed by the White House a threat to American national security, a brutal, murderous dictator, and a menace to the world. It is the hope of the administration and the goal of the war planners that disarmament and regime change be accomplished as swiftly as practical with as little loss of life as possible. But in conflict, Americans, they warn, will die. Some number of our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters, will give their lives for the cause of freedom. At home, with history as our guide and peace our prayer, we, the citizens of this nation, will no doubt rally round those putting willingly themselves in harm's way. Fox News is committed to bring you fair and balanced coverage of the events to come. The O'Reilly Factor is next. I'm Shepard Smith in New York. For all of us in the Fox News family, thank you for trusting us for your news. With the nation on high alert and our armed forces prepared for war, stay brave, stay aware, and stay with Fox.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly reporting from Washington. Thanks for watching us tonight. Short talking points memo this evening so we can get right to our Iraq coverage. The memo will not be kind to Senator Tom Daschle. Right up front, I have to tell you, I do not respect Mr. Daschle. A few months ago, he publicly criticized the Fox News channel for not being fair to the Democratic Party. That, of course, is baloney. We have just as many Democrats on this network as Republicans. But what Mr. Daschle did not tell you was that we had invited him on the Factor dozens of times, and his staff always dismissed us rudely. Now, to be fair, lots of folks are rude to us because we don't pander to anyone. But Daschle was outrageous in his accusations and intellectually dishonest as well. Now, the South Dakota senator finds himself in the same position as Trent Lott. His credibility is finished. As you may know, Daschle has criticized the war against Iraq, saying, quote, "This president failed so miserably in diplomacy that we are now forced to war." But in 1998, when President Clinton bombed Iraq, Daschle said this: "We have virtually exhausted our diplomatic effort to get the Iraqis to comply with their own agreements and with international law. Given that, we have got to force them to comply, and we are doing so militarily." So what's up with the hypocrisy, Senator? You were all for using force 5 years ago. Now, after 9/11, the threat from Saddam's weapons is even greater. What say you? The no-spin truth is Mr. Daschle's playing politics in a time of life and death, and that should be unacceptable to all Americans, not just Republicans. Senator Lott lost power because his credibility dissolved after he applauded a philosophy that hurt African Americans. Now Senator Daschle is embracing a philosophy that is inconsistent with his past positions, and it is not helpful at all in the war against Saddam. So Talking Points believes it is over for Tom Daschle, at least as far as national influence is concerned. I also believe the good people of South Dakota need to take a hard look at this guy. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, here's the latest out of Iraq. The 48-hour deadline for Saddam Hussein to get out of Baghdad has passed. He has ignored it. War could come at any time. Thousands of U.S. troops are near Kuwait's border with Iraq, just waiting for orders to cross. Meantime, U.S. jets have dropped bombs on several Iraqi artillery guns in southern Iraq. And 17 Iraqi soldiers have surrendered already to American GIs near the Kuwaiti border. If anything breaks during this hour, we will, of course, bring it to you immediately. Joining us now here in our D.C. studios, Fox News military analyst, Major General Paul Vallely, and in New York, Colonel David Hunt. Major General, you outranked the Colonel, so we'll begin with you.
Oh, starting already. Okay, here we
Colonel,
go.
you know what? You got to watch
Here we go.
yourself here. All right, nuts and bolts. All right, nuts and bolts. The order has already been given, you believe, to attack, correct?
I think so. Yes, Bill.
All right. And you were briefed today by very high-ranking military officials, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How does it go down from here?
Well, what happens, Bill, once the president gives the order to launch the military campaign, that then goes from the Pentagon, from the White House to the Pentagon, down to Central Command, and then, of course, over to Qatar, where the main headquarters is. Or it may go directly to Qatar from the Pentagon.
That's where General Tommy Franks
That's where General Franks is, and he's running the operation, just like General Schwarzkopf did
in the first
back in
Gulf War.
1991.
So Franks has the discretion to launch when he feels the conditions are best.
That's correct. And what those conditions are, weather, what the enemy is doing, are the troops in the position to launch the attack. So all of those have to come together in the best possible way.
How do they communicate in Qatar with General Franks and his commanders on a Kuwaiti border?
Well, fortunately, with the satellites, Bill, today we can communicate wireless in many cases or secure landlines. So they have a variety of methods to communicate, even
but it's
through
phone,
the internet.
Primarily phone, correct?
Phone and even internet.
And it's okay. They have computers.
Sure,
and
absolutely,
like
that are basically classified.
So Franks doesn't have to go back to the Pentagon now. It's his call when they go.
Well, they're on the line all the time, and so he'll tell the president we're going to launch on such and such an hour. Maybe it's 1 o'clock this morning.
But he
maybe
will
it's 2
tell the
o'clock.
president before he tells
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's what he has to do, is notify we're ready to go and we're launching at this time on this day.
All right. Now, obviously, the enemy can intercept cell phone calls and all of that. So the safer way is on the landline or
That's what we call secure transmission.
Okay. Now, Colonel, what are you hearing in New York among your sources?
Yeah, you had a bad little firefight in Basra with some special air service. British 22 SAS. They whacked a bunch of Iraqis there, probably killed about 10. And they were in there to help these great Marines and British soldiers that are going to hit to Basra. We also had Air Force bombing today, some artillery pieces that will also could affect these great guys going for Basra. Also, we got a sandstorm problem, which is maybe why we didn't see bombs drop as soon as 8 o'clock tonight landed. The problem is, as the general can verify, talk to you about, is the fact you've got lasers can be affected somewhat by the sand. And again, we attack when we're ready, when it's right for us, and all the pieces are lined up, because there's a big difference how we're going to do this from last time.
Isn't it better for the U.S. to maybe hold back for a day and just spook the Iraqis like crazy, because they're got to be jumpy? I mean, they're running across the border. Someone to surrender now.
Sure. The longer you wait, the problem is you're going to have more Iraqis coming across to give up. But we have a better plan. Yeah, absolutely. And that, the guys, smart guys are thinking just that way. Psychological operations people that are advising the general in Qatar and the people at the Department of Defense and tell people exactly that way. But my bet is after the president gave the okay to the general, you go when you want, that now they're playing that game. But I also think, as the general's already mentioned, that weather is one of the key factors, and I think the sandstorm thing is a problem.
Okay. Now, General, when it launches, all right, it's going to be simultaneous, correct? North, South, Basra, Air Force, Marines, boom.
That's right. That's right. Total joint force operation coming from many different directions, Bill. North, from the west, from the south, maybe two-pronged attack, what we call an axis of advance up from Saudi Arabia maybe, and Kuwait, and even from the Persian Gulf, where we have the Marines on those ships with helicopters. Yeah. Now, I think what they may do, there will be a northern front, Bill. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. That was confirmed today. There will be a northern front.
Yeah, Turkey's going to let them bring special commandos through. And
probably let some come in under the radar, use the bases. But the Marines have the capability, as well as the 101st, to air assault up there over land. And they can do that, of course, much more rapidly than the tanks or the mechanized division. So I think you'll see maybe some airborne operations, air assault very early on.
But all at once.
All at once.
All at once. Not like the first Gulf War where there was the Air Force and everything.
That's right.
Now, Colonel, I want to show a picture, a live shot from Baghdad tonight. And not a lot of parties going on there, okay? The Associated Press reporting the city is a ghost town, that most people, it's a city of 5 million, most of the citizens of Baghdad have gotten out of Dodge. They're gone. And this will make it a lot easier for coalition forces, correct?
Absolutely. What we're trying to do with this simultaneous attack that's been very well described already is avoid as much as we possibly can civilian casualties and hurting civilian buildings, even bridges. It's interesting you say, you know, they've abandoned the place, it looks at, but they leave the lights on, which is easier for us. This is not a smart guy that's running this from Baghdad. But yeah, this looks like everybody understands what's about to happen. And as you've already mentioned, maybe making them sweat them out a few more hours, have them make some more mistakes. And also on a simultaneous attack issue, I also think we got guys already in country, very close.
Yeah, we're going to. We don't want you to. We got a special forces guy coming up behind you, and he's going to tell us where they are and what they're doing.
Okay.
That is, of course, happening right now. Well, it looks like that. You know, the calm before the storm, obviously, and we're all praying that this goes the USA's way. But the orders have been kill Saddam or capture him.
Capture or kill. They really want to try him for war crimes.
Do they really? Where? In The Hague? Or?
Well, it could be, or even within Iraq itself. There's a couple options going around, but they're going to get him, and if he stays in Baghdad or Tikrit, we're going to have our Delta Force go in, our special ops, and they're going to do what they call a snatch operation. They're going to snatch him, grab him, and then they'll deal with him.
Well, I hope they slap the living daylights out of his sons before they do. All right, General.
Thanks, Bill.
Colonel, thanks very much. We'll be seeing you guys throughout our coverage. And next on the rundown, as we mentioned, U.S. Special Forces already engaged in combat. We'll tell you how. And then a call for Secretary of State Powell to resign. We'll tell you why. Right back as the Factor continues from D.C.
Talking Point.
In the Unresolved Problem segment tonight, we have had an interesting discussion on the Radio Factor today about freedom and the abuse of it. I submit to you this evening that any American who commits civil disobedience in this time of war and terror is putting other Americans in danger. That's because the authorities should be focusing all their energies on protecting us from killers, like those on 9/11. And if those authorities are diverted by dragging you out of the street, our protection is not as great as it should be. Freedom of speech is fine. Breaking the law in this intense time is not. With us now in our New York studio is Professor Dave McFadden, who is chairman of the History Department at Fairfield University in Connecticut, and he sees things a bit differently. Now, Professor, when we were talking on the radio, you were saying historically America has a long tradition of dissent during war, and that's true. But it's different now because the war is here on our soil, and all the authorities must be coordinated to protect us. As I said, to divert their attention elsewhere, I think, is dangerous.
In the entire history of U.S. dissent during wars, there have been occasions like this in the past. There have always been dissent, and dissent must be protected if American freedoms are going to be protected. It's a major feature of the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, and it's been struggled for over many years, from the American Revolution to the Civil War, to the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Every time there have been protesters, and that protecting that right is absolutely critical to protecting
But there's a difference
American freedom.
There's a difference between protesting legally and illegally, and I'm going to submit to you. You see, look, you know what I'm saying here. This is different. It's a different circumstance. We need all our law enforcement to be protecting us against attacks at home. We don't need, and I believe it is morally wrong, for these protesters to divert those people away from protecting us. Professor, I believe it is morally wrong.
I think there's a difference between deciding that at this point in time it is wise to commit civil disobedience, and I think it is not. I think it is wrong at the moment to commit civil disobedience.
Good. I'm glad you feel that way.
But the right of civil disobedience, that is people breaking the law for moral reasons, and they know they're going to take the penalty for that, That right is firmly entrenched in American history,
All right,
from Henry
fine.
David Thoreau in
In theory,
1848 up to now.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I will tell you this. If I find out anybody is doing that, all right, and today, just today in Washington here, people were arrested. Again, taking the Washington police away from their primary duty of protecting the people who live in the city because these idiots were trying to block traffic. It is morally wrong for them to do it. They should be condemned by Americans and shunned.
No, they should be protected, because otherwise, what are we fighting for in this war? If we don't have our freedoms, if we don't have
You don't have the freedom
to dissent,
become a public safety hazard. I don't want my family attacked because you're going to stand out in front of my driveway waving a sign. It's a public safety issue now.
The problem with calling it a public safety issue, this has been true before in American history. We act like this situation is completely new. Of course, the World Trade Center disaster is completely new.
Absolutely.
But the idea of using bombs, the idea of blocking traffic like May Day, this has happened before in American history.
Yeah, but Professor, you're apologizing for people who may get other people killed because of their own ego.
No,
we all
I'm
know
not.
that you can stand on your property and wave your sign all day long, or call up your friends, or make a banner, or take a television or radio or newspaper advertisement.
If someone is willing to block traffic, they should be
Don't divert the law
arrested.
enforcement authorities away from their duties because of your ego. That's what it's about. It's ego.
It's not always about ego. There's
This
some
case it is.
There's some great issues of conscience here. There's people who are opposed to war in any form. There are people around the world and in this country that are opposed to this war. They have a right to demonstrate.
Yeah, on their property, not breaking the law and
they have
diverting
a
the
right
other
to
attention.
protest
No, they don't.
publicly.
And I'll tell you what, if I were a prosecutor, I'd charge them with multiple felonies. I'd make their life a living hell. Hey, Professor, we appreciate your point of view. Very lively debate. Thank you. Next on the rundown, the most controversial story of the evening, if you can believe it, are some networks biased against the USA vis-a-vis Iraq. We'll name names. We'll debate it in a moment. Time now for the most ridiculous item of the day. As you may know, actress Susan Sarandon is about as left-wing as they come, this side of Beijing. However, her 79-year-old mother, Lenora Tomlin, says, quote, I am a conservative. I voted for George W. Bush, and I simply agree with most everything he has said. Now, wouldn't you like to go to Easter dinner with Susan and Lenora? I would. Might be ridiculous, but it could be a lot of fun. Finally, tonight, to mail tons of it about the Pope. Kevin Parasol, Arnold, Maryland. Bill, I heard you say you are a Catholic, but you disagree with the Pope. I know Saddam is a bad person who kills his citizens, but you should know that what counts is the afterlife. Saying bad things about the Pope will only hurt you in the afterlife. Well, Mr. Parasol, allowing innocent people to be killed is not going to do you too much good in the afterlife either, if you get my drift. Susanna Ruddle, Herndon, Virginia. As a Catholic, I'm appalled. The Pope John Paul II has not aggressively challenged child molesters and tyrants. Perhaps our church needs a regime change, too. Michael Vincent, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Wild Bill, the papacy has only made 2 infallible statements in the past 150 years. You average about 3 a show. The Pope giving any backing to this war would endanger Christians around the world. Irene Elena May, Roanoke, Virginia. Mr. O'Reilly, I personally find it hard to believe that this Pope, who was a staunch supporter of freedom in his native Poland, would be so opposed to a war that would release thousands of people from the iron fist of the tyrant Saddam. Tom Rona, Barnegat, New Jersey. Bill, why do you bother going to Mass? If you don't believe the Holy Father is infallible, you are not a Catholic. Mr. Verona, you are so misguided. The Pope is only infallible when he speaks on the issues of faith and morals, not public policy. Peggy Hebert, Los Angeles. Bill, it seems to me, for all the time you spend pontificating, perhaps a little humility might draw you closer to the truth. The Pope himself has not called this an unjust war. Well, Ms. Hebert, the Pope calls the war immoral, okay? Larry Papa, Bend, Oregon, of all people, Pope John Paul should understand how delay caused the unnecessary deaths of my family and millions of other Polish citizens as Hitler marched through Poland. If the world had stood up to him in 1936, Poland would not have been enslaved for 50 years. Pat Corbat, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Bill, don't worry too much about the Catholic League. Thinks of you. Well, Mr. Corbat, if I worried about what everybody thought of me, I'd be in a jar somewhere. Kevin Mann, also from Roanoke. Mr. O'Reilly, I'm a 16-year-old high school student, and I believe the best way to teach is for teachers not to give us their opinions, but to help us find our own. Kristen Chen, Ocean Township, New Jersey. I am a 14-year-old in 8th grade. Lately, my class has been asking our teachers if we could discuss the war with Iraq. But most teachers respond by telling us it is not appropriate. Well, I disagree with that, Chris. And you guys should be able to discuss this and any other important topic in your history and civics classes. And you can tell the teacher I said that. How about the website? I want you to check that out. www.foxnews.com/O'Reilly. Beautiful spring day here in Washington, and that means you need Factor gear. It also means you need a paperback copy of The No Spin Zone, which is in your bookstore right now or on the website, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, why do you need a paperback copy of The No Spin Zone on a nice spring day? I haven't figured that out yet, but I will. Also, please email us with pithy comments. O'Reilly at foxnews.com. O'Reilly at foxnews.com. Now, we're getting about 30,000 letters a week, okay? So the odds of getting on are not that great. But if you keep it pithy, right to the point, and you have a little different take, then you got a better chance. But even if you don't get on the air, I read a lot of the mail. I read about 1,000 letters today, okay? And that helps me formulate my analysis, talking points, and all of that stuff based upon what you guys are, how you're seeing it. So it's worth to write us. And we'd like to hear from all of you around the world as well. All right? That is it for us today. As always, we thank you for watching The Factor. Please remember the Radio Factor on Westwood One, where we're causing trouble every day. Hannity and Combs is next. Dan Quayle will be with them. I'm Bill O'Reilly reporting this evening from Washington, D.C. We do hope to see you again next time. And remember, the spin stops right here.